Atlantic CIL podcast. I'm here with the Executive Director of the MOCEANS Center for Independent Living, Judyth Brown. We are just going to discuss CILs and what her CIL is doing and how she got involved in disability work. Hi, Judyth.
Hi, how you doing, Donald?
I'm good. I like how we act like we didn't say hi to each other 2 minutes ago, but we got to keep it official for the podcast.
Listen, we're just being polite here. It's fine.
Yes. You got to do the thing. You got to do the intro. Otherwise, people get, what's going on. So anyway, so Judyth, how did you get involved in disability? How did you become the executive director of MOCEANS? We started around the same time. So tell everybody your interesting story.
It is. I don't know if it's interesting, but it's definitely roundabout. I don't have a background in disability rights. I don't have a real background in activism, except that I had been working in education in another nonprofit, a fairly large nonprofit, and who shall go nameless at the moment. But 2008 happened, and the ripple effects of that kind of were moving through the nonprofit. So I was one of many people who got riffed out of that institution. They were kind of letting a lot of people go, and I was one of them. I had been doing community education for about 5 years, loved it, and all of a sudden I found myself actually starting again. So I had been working a little bit in social media, and I found that there were a lot of adults at the time who didn't understand it. So I figured, well, I'll go into the business world and teach adults about social media, because the business owners didn't know any more than the parents I'd been talking to. And that evolved into a small social media marketing business. And I started looking for folks to hire, and I found that the sweet spot in hiring turned out to be people with disabilities. They were eager for work. They were looking for work that didn't involve going into an office. I was looking for people who are well educated and well spoken, and it just worked out really well. And that sounds like nothing about how I got into disability rights. It seems like a sideline, except that one of the people who I hired happened to be on the board of MOCEANS. And she kept harassing me, to come and join the board. And I did the reasonable thing, which was to say no. She pursued me for about 18 months before I finally, I think in a moment of weakness, relented and joined the board. So back to you.
My board you were getting harassed to join a board. You rightfully said no, but then you gave in.
Exactly. And I gave in, I was inducted into the board, and a week later, the executive director left the company, and the succession plan that they had in place failed within minutes. So the next thing I know, I've got the chairman of the board on the phone calling me up and going, "Hey, listen, do you want to do something interim with MOCEANS?" And I had no background, but he seemed fairly desperate. And I said, "You know what? Sure. For 90 days, I'll give you 90 days as interim executive director," and that was 5 years ago.
Right. So your plan didn't work at all. Your plan not to go on the board, and your plan to stay there for 90 days did not work out. Yeah. So they sucked you. Well, you must have loved something about it. You must have got, and that's what happens. You do get, as somebody who also came aboard as CIL, you do get committed to the mission and sucked into it. So
absolutely. And that's really what happened. Was after about the first 30 days, I really looked at the board and said, no, I want this job. I'll let the other business go, and I'll take this on. And they had been interviewing, and they chose me anyway. So, they had well qualified people they could have had, and they took me. So I guess it was meant to be.
Right. That's awesome. So what's it been like? How was it like coming in? Of course, you don't have to say everything, but how was it like coming in as a new director? And what were some of the challenges and the rewards? What was that whole experience like?
Well, first of all, as a person with a disability, I didn't know that this existed. So I've lived my entire life dealing with my own disability. Plus, I have a brother who has more limitations than I do. So this really spoke to me on a very personal level. And I found myself drawn into the work because I felt like this is the thing that I wished had existed. I wish I'd known it existed for me, for my family. And the more I did the work, the more it was a lot like drinking from the fire hose.
I know that feeling.
You can attest. But the more I met people, the more I got to know the mission and got to understand what independent living really meant. There was no going back.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. I think it was really the mission that hooked me, and we have a similar story. You know, I got out of law school. I was looking to get involved in disability law or disability advocacy. I got on the board of the Atlantic CIL that was just getting started. One thing led to another, like you, and you just end up, applying and getting a job. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's why I tell people, when people ask me how you get jobs like this, I'm like, you just show up places and sometimes you just land on them.
This is truly the hand of heaven. I could not have written my high school guidance counselor. If she was still alive and I told her what had happened here, she would have told me I was a liar. Right. Absolutely.
Well, I always say if I describe this job, if I met myself 10 years ago and be like, this is what you're going to be doing, myself from 10 years ago would be like, what? That sounds like not what we're planning at all.
Right.
So, but you never know.
So for all the young people who are out there who are planning their futures and that sort of thing, I don't want you to think that you shouldn't plan. Really, by all means, plan. It does happen the right way sometimes.
Right. No, and planning's good. And when you have a plan, it's easy to wing it. When you have a plan, you can when you have a general direction, you just got to be open that maybe your exact path isn't what you envision.
No, that's a t-shirt, when you have a plan, it's easy to wing it. I think that's got to be a t-shirt somewhere.
Yeah, and I'll give a shout out to my administrative coordinator. She says that all the time. So I that's not me. I give them credit. So yeah, so it was really the mission for me too. And also what you were saying, I didn't know about CILs until I started as well. So we always talk as directors about, what CILs are, and because they have a long history. I mean, I was looking at your website. Motions has been around since I think before I was born, the seeds of motion.
It's 32 years. So that says how old you are.
Yeah, right on the money, right? Right on the money. So I think, but yeah, so it's very grassroots for people who are new to CILs. It's very grassroots, and it's very much about individual autonomy and responsibility and kind of people in the community representing themselves. It's very bottom up and not top down. So it's
and I think what's interesting about that, and this is where I want to get into where we're headed and what we're all about at Motions. The CIL that I came to 5 years ago had 6 employees. I was the only full timer. Now we're at 25 employees. I'm sorry, 3s, 5s. Who knows? We have 25 employees, and we've serving 4 times the number of people that we were before. But the thing that we're looking to do is to ultimately turn this back around and really make it a grassroots activism kind of an organization. In the 70s, it was supposed to be grassroots CILs everywhere from sea to shining sea. That didn't quite happen.
No.
But what I'm looking to do, and what we're hoping to do, we're starting a program. We've been working on it for a while now. Starting a program called Neighbor Aid, where we train people in community to act as I&R volunteers. So, whether it's a church or a school or a civic organization, we can take volunteers and teach them how to serve their communities by providing information, which is a lot of what CILs do. So we're really looking to go back to the grassroots and empower people moving up.
That's awesome. And when does your Neighbor Aid start? When is it rolling out? Do you have a date yet? Do you have a time?
So we did a beta organization about a year ago, and funny story about that, we had 3 volunteers. We hired 2 of them, which kind of disrupted that. We went back to the drawing board, and we're ready to launch again this fall. We have a couple of partner agencies that we're looking at. Right now, we're looking particularly at a house of worship. I don't want to use names yet because they're not official. So we're looking to start again this fall.
As soon as you name it, it will fall through.
It'll disappear. Yeah. But yeah, we have a full curriculum to train volunteers in how to administer INR and not be, not feel like social workers, doing a little bit of grassroots education about common local problems, rather than us going again top down and saying, well, we should teach you this and here's the independent living skill you need. We want them to be able to teach their own.
Yeah, so it's just really what CILs are about, giving people the power to take control of their own destinies and decide what their own destiny is. Like you said, it's not supposed to be like, this is what you need. It's supposed to be like, this is what we can offer. And if you were feeling it, come join us. If not, it's your life too.
Yeah. And I think it's more than that. I think it's also, so how do you want to live your life? And what do you need from us?
Right, exactly. How can we help you accomplish whatever your goals are, or whatever your not goals are? So whatever it is. You were talking about how when you started, it was 6 employees, and you've really grown it. So what have you really focused on? What has led to that growth, and what have you really invested in?
Yeah. So I guess within the year of me coming in, we started with support coordination. Because there's so much of that is all about independent living. We took that on. We expanded our youth gateway program. One of the core services is youth transition to adult life. And while we are doing pre-employment training, what we're really looking to do is to create that bridge from high school to adulthood. So we call it Youth Gateway, and we've invested a lot in that. That's definitely going to be growing more. We're looking to create more social supports, more postgraduate supports. And for people who are not going to college, college is not for everyone. There has to be a way forward. Since a lot of services are tied to the schools, they need to be able to find their way forward. The independent living department is as, it always traditionally was. Lots of groups, lots of paperwork, but we just recently launched an education and advocacy department because we feel, number one, advocacy needs its own time and place. It's just really, really time-consuming work, and to try to lump it in with everything else just means that it takes a back seat. But more importantly, education for the community is something that we're really committed to. Not just training people with disabilities and their families, but training professionals. We want to get in there with the architects and the lawyers and the CPAs and the police officers and the doctors and nurses, all of whom need CEUs or continuing education of some sort, and be able to offer them the kind of insightful education that means something in their profession and definitely means something for our world.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what is supports coordination? Because I know you and I know what it is, but explain it to people who don't understand it, because it's one of those words you and I can throw around, but there could be people out there. What's that?
Sure. So in less than 50 words, people who acquire a disability before the age of 19 are considered to have a developmental disability, and given certain criteria, they may get a budget from the state to support their needs. That could be things like supported housing, could be therapies, all kinds of stuff that's covered by this budget. And those people, rather than getting a caseworker, I was going to go under 100 words, right?
Yes.
Sure. Those people, rather than getting a caseworker, which is what they used to do, the caseworker would tell you where to go and what to do. The state of New Jersey has gone to a model where the person controls their money and they get a support coordinator to help them coordinate support, to help them make the choices and fulfill those choices.
That's awesome. So you're basically doing INR. You're basically, a more intense version, of course, because I know there's more paperwork and more,
Well, and we also tend to have people with more intense needs, like medical group homes are as rare as they come, but we help people find placement in medical group homes that gets them out of living in a nursing home.
Right.
Stuff like that.
Which is what all CILs are about at our core, is the alternatives to institutionalization, like nursing homes. So thank you for that brief.
That was brief, huh?
That was brief. I do appreciate it. And talk a little bit more about your transition program, because I know that's grown in the years since you started.
So, COVID changes everything, right?
Right.
Uh,
Allegedly. That's what people tell me.
allegedly. So back in 2018, we got a grant to do youth transition work, pre-employment training, how to get and keep a job for young people with disabilities, right? That was great. We were going into the schools, we were doing a paper-based curriculum, and then this funny thing happened where they told everybody to stay home, a little pandemic here and there.
Right.
So we pivoted and went to find a digital alternative to the paper-based, school-based work that we'd been doing. We didn't really find what we needed, so we started writing our own. Let's see, that was 2020. It was March of 2020. We managed to complete that grant year and to start the next grant year fully remote. And if you've ever, I say if you've ever, uh, we all know what Zoom calls are, right?
Yes.
So we've done a lot of work trying to make these highly interactive and appropriate for people's different levels of understanding. As people started to return, what we discovered during the pandemic was that we reached a lot more people than we could possibly do by driving to schools. So as the pandemic restrictions receded, we started doing a hybrid program. So we go to the schools part of the time, and part of the time we offer online learning for classes, as well as some online learning that people can do independently. So
That's
there's
so
that.
cool. And
Yeah.
I know you've really invested. I really like what you've done. You have a lot of virtual stuff, and I think you've done the right thing of just kind of embracing where people are with this stuff, and at least giving them the option, because that's what I'm big on. Like I'm a big virtual person in terms of, I think I just want it to be an option. I'm not saying that in person is not a way to go, but like for a lot of people with disabilities, having the virtual option for a lot of things is very important.
And
And go
that's
ahead.
really a good point too, because I got to tell you, if there's a silver lining to COVID, it's that it showed people that this was not a hardship, that going virtual was, an accommodation that can be made. Lots of people were pushing for this, especially in education, long before COVID, and they were
Right.
getting pushback. Remote
Right.
work,
Right.
unheard of. You
Right.
must
How
be in
can
an
you
office.
do remote work? It'll be anarchy. Well, it won't be.
Right.
It's
Except that it's more productive. We've actually gone to a hybrid model. We're permanently hybrid as an organization. So we've got people who are, their home base is their home, and occasionally they come into the office. And I got to tell you, the productivity is amazing.
see, my cell is where you are. We are, some people are working from home, and that's where they work. And
Yeah.
some people hated working from home and like being in an office setting. And I just think, and I just think there's a way to do both, and you can do it and make it with people with disabilities have been arguing for a long time, which make it based on what that person needs or where they work best or where,
And that's the silver lining. I think you hit it on the head. It's like we've proven, we have done a global sampling of what remote work looks like. So now as we evolve forward, we can make the case that people are capable of doing work that suits their needs and still be productive contributing members of a company, of society, and convincing business owners that this is viable. Well, shoot, half the work is done.
Right, right. And I always say, like you said, all we care about as managers, we want the work done. We want to, be helping people. So I don't really care what room you do that in. Like as long as you're helping people.
Yeah, interestingly, one of the things that has resulted from this, and I know this is it sounds like a negative result. There are always going to be people who take advantage of a situation, and when you're remote, or when your culture is remote, they're not doing their side of the work becomes really obvious. Where in an office, you can skim forever. Oh yeah, I was here, and I was working. You can look like you're working. But once your team really counts on you and knows that you're supposed to be meeting deadlines and filing reports and all of that sort of stuff, boy, if you're not holding up your end of the bargain remotely, it shows. very
That's
quickly.
a good point, because you're right. That's a good way to look at it. Because if you're in an office with like 3 productive employees, you can kind of hide in the background, file some paperwork, but you can't do that when you're virtual. So that's a good way.
Nope.
That's a good way to look at it. It's like, what else that guy? But that's a good way to look at it. I like that. I know you had a lot of, and the other thing I'll say to our audience, so they understand, like all CILs are different. We have the same core mission. We have the same 5 core services: the information, referral, advocacy, transition, peer support, and life skills. But we all are focused on different things. Like I just became, and this podcast is going to come out later, but I just became a DDD vendor. We're going to be a service provider. So I just got that. We just got that. We're going through the process of fingerprinting and doing that whole thing. So it's
congratulations.
Cool. And because our CIL has been around for 5 years, since 2016. I can't do math. 5, 6 years around there.
Almost that. Yeah, I was gonna say it's 6.
Yeah, 6 years. So whereas Judyth CIL has been around for 32, and it's just so, when I want the audience to understand is, you can go to a CIL in your state if you're in New Jersey, or if you're in another state, and it can look totally different. It's based on, what their community needs, what resources they have, where they are in their development. So
absolutely,
it's just, it's the same mission and the same philosophy, but it's, you got to serve your community. You got to be able to pivot and find out what works for you and what team you have and what their strengths are and all that good stuff. So you were talking about an advocacy department, which is something I thought was really cool. What made you focus on that? What made you?
And you know what? It's really funny, because education and advocacy is part of our core mission, and it was all sort of rolled into the IL department. We didn't really have a department when I came on, but as we started developing other programs, rather than calling everything independent living and identifying by funding source, say, it made sense to create different departments. And the thing that always gets pushed to the side is that systems advocacy, because it takes a tremendous amount of organization and time. Building the relationships takes tremendous amounts of time.
Follow up and all that stuff.
All of that. And in order to be sure that wasn't the cookie that fell off the plate, it made sense to give it its own staff and create goals and expectations. Just the training in community development. I mean, given our workload in independent living, nobody had time for it. Right. So we cleaved off. Right. Yeah, we cleaved off that section, our work, and started to create that independently.
And I think you're so right, because especially the systems advocacy piece, like that's key to everything we do. Like if, we get a lot of, because of our name and what we do, we get a lot of requests, I know you do too, about housing. Well, the key to housing is for legislators to build more housing and to give more funding to affordable housing. So and that takes pressure, like I always say, when people want to build affordable housing in your neighborhood, there needs to be a group of people for it, because I guarantee you there's going to be a group of people against it who show up to those meetings. And
absolutely.
There's got to be, so you're investing in that, I think is really smart and really important, because it focuses on, employment, for people with disabilities to become unemployed more. A lot of that is, policy and Social Security and all that stuff that affects people's ability to earn and save money. And that takes effort and energy. And, I always tell
all of the above.
I always tell people who call us, sometimes they'll complain to us about the rules, or why isn't there enough housing, or why is my Social Security like this? Why do I have an overpayment? I'm like, look, we don't make the rules. If we did, it'd be a lot different. But if you would like to talk to the people who make the rules, please contact your local legislator and governor and representative.
And you know what? Totally. And you know what? Here's where going back to the grassroots really makes sense to me, because we can handle one person after another who needs housing. I don't even know how many we handle on a regular basis. But if all of those people who need housing are schooled in how to organize themselves and make an effective approach to the legislature, that's a different issue. Instead of 150 people who need housing, you have a grassroots movement.
Right. And you have that pressure because legislators respond to pressure. They respond to voters. They respond. So if they know, if I don't approve that affordable housing, I'm gonna get letters and calls, and people are gonna be at my town hall meetings asking me questions. I'm just gonna approve it because I don't know how I feel about it really, but I don't want to deal with the cell group.
These folks, where did they come from?
Yes, because like I said, the other groups, they show up. The not in my backyard people who are like, we want the housing, it's not in our neighborhood. Put it over there,
where nobody can see it.
We need this really empty parking lot, because we love empty parking lots.
The funny thing too is that a lot of the NIMBY people, once you get to them and start to work with them, instead of everybody shouting at each other, the folks who are not in my backyard, you might actually get some forward movement. Because if it looks like two opposing factions, well, heck, nobody's gonna win there. But
and if you can explain how affordable housing actually benefits you because it's more housing, puts pressure on the rental market, puts pressure on a lot of things. So it's actually a good thing. But you're right, and having a group that can communicate that, I think is very
exactly.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'll talk all the time.
Were there other challenges? What's some of the things you still look at and you're like, oh, we got to work on that either in your still or kind of system wide stuff like that?
Oh, I mean, how many hours do you have?
I know that's true. That could be like a 6-episode series.
Housing as a human right is one of those things that just irks me. It's like I'm old, so I understand that there was a time where you could spend a quarter of your income and get a decent place to live. I understand that our approach towards housing has shifted away from people's basic needs, and I think that's something we as a CIL, as people with disabilities, as some of the most vulnerable people in our population, we should be out front and much more vocal about this. I think that's the sort of thing that, we could really collaborate with other groups to create some forward movement. Housing as a human right is just an incredibly urgent need.
I agree. And everything is tied to being able to have some form of shelter.
And after
safety.
That, there are lots of other things I'd like to talk about, educational standards for people with disabilities. I think there's a lot of wonderful, amazing people in the school systems, but I think as a whole, the system itself doesn't promote, excellence and real purposeful education that folks who graduate high school can look at and do something with.
Yeah, there's still a lot of both in school and all around. There's still a lot of talking down to people with disabilities and not having high standards for people with disabilities, and that really can trickle down to people. And I think that's what caught me about the CIL philosophy. I mean, when I was first asked to join, I was a little worried. I'm like, okay, is it going to be one of those disability organizations where they patronize and when they're patting you on the head? And we help people with disabilities, but you can't find a person with a disability. They're like at the front desk. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but they're not in any decision-making role. I'm like, I don't want to. It's not really my style. That's not my thing. But that's not what CILs are about. They're about people with disabilities being in the decision-making roles and leading the organization. So that really inspired me, and it's something I really believe in.
Yeah, and you know what, I think you hit on the head too. The core, the heart of what access means. It's not, hey, put a ramp up. It's not, hey, install a door opener. It's, hey, let us into the decision making, not just, nothing about us without us, but hey, let's talk about policy and let's talk about how we want our lives to go as a community. That's the true heart of access. I think that's really what the CILs are all about.
Yeah, I agree. And I like how they even shortened the nothing about us without us now to, I got to keep up with the kids on Twitter because I got to follow them. Like now it's like just nothing without us, which I like because they're everything's about us. Like what issue are you talking about that doesn't touch on people with disabilities? Like everything, healthcare, education, transportation, housing, like it all affects people with disabilities and disproportionately affects people with disabilities. Gun violence, police brutality, like if you look at the statistic, it's all, a lot of it is people, prisons, it's all the people suffering are by and large part minorities especially with disabilities. I mean,
exactly.
It's
that
all connected.
Yeah, that intersectionality gets like zero attention, which
right. Well, we keep fighting every day. And you were talking about, was there anything you learned from COVID besides the virtual? I mean, I know you really moved virtual quick, but were there any other lessons on delivering services and just helping people with disabilities?
So the thing that really struck me was the mutual aid groups that sprung up around COVID. And that's really what inspired the whole neighbor aid thing was the presence of mutual aid groups, communities turning to each other to help each other with the things they know they need. You know that there's an old lady at the end of the street who cannot get up and down those stairs. She is not going to the grocery store. Well, guess what? There are people in the neighborhood who are willing to come and help her, not because she's special in any way or related to them, but because it's the human thing to do.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And because you're connected to that person, even if you don't know them, you have some sort of responsibility to them because you could end up disabled or somebody you love can end up disabled. Like that could be you. That's what I always say. You think it's not you, well, that's just a fleeting moment. Everybody thinks it's not them until it's them.
Until it's your turn.
And then they're like, wait, so there's people with disabilities. This is why they were so upset all the time.
Oh, that's why this is ableism. I get it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we talk about ableism a lot on my podcast. Because I know people still hear that word and they're like, what does that mean? How would you define it? What would be the Judyth definition of ableism?
I think it's an inherent norm. It's a baseline that we're all trained to expect. So we're trained to expect that our bodies will function perfectly, that they will all look a certain way, and that anything that varies from that, either as an improvement or a detriment, is somehow to be noted, either to be put down or diminished or elevated. So, that inherent ableism means that you've got two legs that work in a certain way, that all of your senses work in a certain way, that, you can always strive for better, but anything that's less is to be denied. For people with invisible disabilities, it's like we experience things that are a lot like passing.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. Yes, you do. And it's like, I always say, there's like different forms of ableism for both people with seen and unseen disabilities. Like if your disability is easy to see, like mine, you get judged a lot quicker, but also you get judged both ways. Like people don't question your disability. They just go, oh, he's got cerebral palsy. I get that. Like I can put that in a nice box. It's like, oh,
here's the box.
Click that box. Right. Click that box. I don't know, I've gotten, in my life when I was going through education, I've gotten comments like, wow, I didn't know you can go to law school, which I mean, is so insulting in so many ways. But, but that's the kind of ableism people with seen disabilities go through. And then when it's not seen, that you get oh, you're not really disabled. Why do you have that? Why do you need the accommodation? Stuff like that.
Right. You're faking it.
Yeah.
You're milking the system. It's not real.
Because there are so many benefits, Judyth. There are just so many. I mean, you get so much stuff.
Yeah. hey, I'm going to take this, poverty level living in order to enjoy a mental health condition that tortures me day and night. It's so appealing. I'm just going to go do that. It's just ridiculous.
I really love being on Medicaid where I can't get any resources and can't save any money. I really love my basic Social Security payment that barely ever goes up. This is definitely my plan.
This is what makes life really worth living. Sure. And I think a lot of people who are of the mind that, people with invisible disabilities are cheating somehow, I don't think they ever think past that initial impulse. Why is that you get money and I don't?
Right. It is people do get stuck in their own kind of stuff. All right. And so my last question as we wrap it up would be, how would you tell people who want to get involved in, it doesn't even have to be disability. I always say disability advocacy, but there are plenty of other ways to help people with disabilities that aren't, advocating. So in the disability world, how would you tell them? Would you tell them to, start a social media teaching company where you randomly end up on a board, and then is that what it is?
I would totally not recommend that as a career path. Believe me, there are easier ways to do that. I think starting at home. When I say at home, I mean starting with with the people It's one thing to open a door for somebody who needs help with equipment. It's another thing to ask them what their life is like, get to know them, include them in your world as friends, as a natural part of your world. If that's the point of entry, I think it's the sort of thing that anybody can do.
I agree. And I know it sounds corny, but it's true. And as you get older, you start to realize that some of the corny things that people told you are accurate. But like just get involved. Like a lot of organizations would love to have volunteers. Like
volunteering would be great.
You don't have to have like a master plan. Like just start showing up and doing good work and participating and being involved, and things lead to people notice those things. Like you don't have to, and then if you start off, if you start off as a volunteer and then a job opens up, which could happen, they might think of you. You've been such a good volunteer. So I would just tell people.
We've had that happen. Yeah, we've had that happen where we hired volunteers for sure. I'm going to say also, you know what? If you feel that that's a little bit too much, get the newsletter. Just subscribe to the newsletter. Start there. Just be aware.
And start, and then maybe your first thing could be coming to an activity or just start meeting people and start, it doesn't have to be like a big, because like Judyth and I laugh because it wasn't a plan. If you ask me, if somebody said like 2 years ago to me, you're going to be running this thing called the Atlantic CIL, I'd be like, what are you talking about? It's like, how is that going to happen? Nothing is going to work out. But like, that's not even on my radar. You just show up somewhere and then,
and suddenly it happens.
And suddenly it happens. So thanks so much for joining. You're the first director on. Now at the next directors meeting, you got to put pressure on the other directors to be on the show. And then at the end, after we do everybody, we're gonna have like a vote on, everybody's gonna vote on who was their favorite.
Who's the most fun? I want to do a plug. I want to do a plug before we go.
Yeah, plug everything. Plug everything you need.
Oh my gosh! So we're doing a revamp on some of our groups, that sort of thing. Summer always is the time where we reevaluate. But September 11th, we are having our annual beach bash at Long Branch Beach. Short story: the city of Long Branch bought hard decking that makes it possible for people who use mobility equipment to get onto the beach. Not just wave from the boardwalk, but onto the beach. And yes, they do have the equipment to get people into the water. So if you want to come down, we have bands coming. We have family-friendly activities. It's a friend raiser, not a fundraiser.
Right, and it sounds like a lot of fun. And so you're telling me, Judyth, that it's not enough just to let people with disabilities look at the beach, that they have to be able to get on the beach.
You want to get sand in your wheels. Absolutely.
Yeah. And by the way, anybody without a disability, my dad always brings this up. Anybody without a disability who's ever not had the experience of trying to get a wheelchair or trying to walk with a physical disability on a beach, he's like, people have no idea. It's like, it's a whole process. It's a whole process.
Oh my gosh. It is crazy. But Manasquan has bought the decking as well. We haven't done anything with them this year. So anybody who uses a wheelchair, if you miss the beach bash, Long Branch has their hard deck out all summer long. Manasquan does as well. So there are places where, yeah, you can actually get a wheelchair onto the beach, and it's pretty exciting.
Right. And, and that's the idea of sales. That's what we fight for. You just want to be able to it not be a whole project for you to go to the beach.
Right.
So that is, that's our basic mission. And plug any socials. You have an awesome website. I always look at your website. Your website always looks good.
Oh, thank you. You know what? Right off the top of my head, I'm gonna humana. We're gonna be at Ocean Fest at the 4th of July. Come check out our booth. We've actually been street teaming, which means that we show up at other people's events in t-shirts and handing out all kinds of kits and prizes and stuff. So, I mean, yeah, we're out and about. But yeah, definitely plan on coming to the Beach Bash. You don't need mobility equipment in order to enjoy it. It's quite the day, and it's free.
Right, and I would also just tell people, just check out Judyth, the website of the Motion Center. Just Google Motion Center for Independent Living. Everything pops up. And, her website's got their socials.
You gotta tell them. You gotta tell them how it's spelled though, because they'll spell it the right way.
Spell it the wrong way. Yeah, spell it the wrong way. Spell it how they do it. How you did the motion.
Yeah.
This is the typical sell great branding that our forefathers left us with. What's the right way to spell it?
MOCEANS. Spell oceans and put an M in front of it.
Yes, because it's Monmouth and Ocean County.
That's right.
It does make sense, but when you say motions, people think of motions like dancing.
Yeah, it would make a lot of sense that way too.
Yes, but but it's a great website. Judyth's a great director. She really deserves a lot of credit because she took the center that really did have a great foundation. I love your website because it gives it has a brief history, and sometimes I think it's important to always remember where you came from. And now you got this whole thing, so that's awesome.
Yeah, so if you like us on the website, like us on Facebook, we're on Instagram. I don't think we're on Twitter because I'm old and I don't do Twitter. We may get on TikTok.
We're not on Twitter either. That could be dangerous. Me with the Twitter could be, that could be canceled too soon.
I'm not a Twitter fan.
Yeah.
Reddit, yes. Twitter, no. And I won't do TikTok because I'd never get anything done in my life.
Right. You're with me. We got our Facebook and our Instagram, and we may do TikTok. I don't know. I'm still weary. But anyway, so thank you, Judyth, for being with us for this episode, and I'm sure we'll talk again because there's always going to be stuff coming up. And
absolutely a pleasure. Holler whenever you want to chat.
All right. Bye, Judyth.
Bye for now.